Hi, it's Holly Robichaud with breaking news on term limits, and once again, we're talking about Indiana. We've got exciting news today for you. Our resolution for term limits on Congress just passed the State House chamber. That's right, it passed. Indiana has now joined Tennessee and North Carolina as states that need to pass just one more chamber to put Congress on notice that the era of career politicians must end. Thankfully, the Indiana State House is listening to 87% of the people who are fed up with the seniority system in Congress. Now it's time to get Indiana State Senate to follow the lead of the State House and get this done. Don't you agree? Action is moving rapidly in many states to adopt our resolution. In Nebraska, State Senator Lauren Lippincott introduced Legislative Resolution 282 that would have the Cornhusker state on record for an amendment proposing a convention for congressional term limits. We've got some news coming out of Kansas today. Our resolution for term limits on Congress, sponsored by J.R. Clazy, is picking up steam. SCR 1609 will be scheduled for a vote in the State Senate Affairs Committee soon. In Florida, the first state to pass our term limits resolution, the state legislature is passing legislation this session to shore up its language for an amendment proposing convention for congressional term limits. In Tennessee, our resolution still needs to pass the state senate and has been pushed back until March 26. We'll keep you up to date on what's happening in the volunteer state.
In Utah, State Representative Ken Ivory introduced House Joint Resolution 6 that would put the Beehive State on record calling for a convention for proposing a congressional term limits amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
New polling from Alaska by RMG Research shows that congressional term limits is popular among voters anywhere in the nation. 84% of likely voters polled in the last frontier state support congressional term limits. 76% want Alaska legislature to adopt our resolution calling for an amendment proposing a convention for congressional term limits. Congressional candidates across the nation of all political affiliations are continuing to see the widespread support that congressional term limits has, as we mentioned in polling earlier in the show. This past week, we saw an additional 14 congressional candidates sign our pledge. We're going to have a record number in the 2024 elections. Now it's time for some federal news. U.S. Term Limits has filed an amicus brief in the high-profile Trump versus Anderson case, which involves Colorado's decision to remove Donald Trump from the 2024 ballot. The U.S. Term Limits brief is neutral, meaning it takes no position on whether a state can remove Trump from the ballot under the 14th Amendment. Instead, it argues that the court's 1995 ruling in the U.S. Term Limits versus Thornton case is inapplicable to the Trump case. In the Thornton case, the court held by a narrow margin, 5-4, that the states were powerless to impose term limits or other qualifications on their own members of Congress. That decision invalidated congressional term limits in 23 states, suppressing the voice of millions of Americans who voted for pro-term limits initiatives. In the Trump case, Colorado is not attempting to use its own laws to disqualify former President Trump, but rather the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Therefore, the brief argues Thornton is not relevant to the Trump case. Additionally, it forcibly argues that Thornton should be overruled by the court in the near future. Now it's time for the Corrupt Politician of the Week, and this one's from my home state of Massachusetts. It's Representative Bill Keating. Keating was first elected to the United States Congress in 2010. Prior to that, he served as district attorney for 10 years, in Massachusetts State Senate for 14 years, and the Massachusetts House of Representatives for 8 years. As you can imagine, he's no fan of term limits. Representative Keating purchased between $22,000 and $155,000 in stocks and bonds issued by companies that contract with the United States military while he was a member of the House Armed Services Committee and served on its Intelligence Subcommittee. The New York Times cited him for 6 conflicts of interest. Every week there's another corrupt politician. We're never running out of them because we don't have term limits. Let's make it a reality. Please get involved today by going to termlimits.org and taking action. We need your help. And be sure to share this program every week with your friends and family. This is Holly Robichaud for U.S. Term Limits Breaking News. I'll see you next week.